Hey folks, another video on spring bulbs. Today we're going to talk about ranunculus and uh, talk about some general things about what we do. Now, they always have to preface this is what we do. Doesn't mean this is the only way, but thought we would show you some things that we're doing different. Okay, this hoop house we constructed about 2 years ago. Maybe this is its third year actually. And right from the very beginning, we made this a no-till place. We did not till the soil in here at all in constructing the beds or anything. And so we have been building up this in terms of trying to get the biology back in and trying to get the organic matter up and using a variety of different techniques. But the main thing that we do in here is we use KNF and JADAM, which is Korean natural farming methods. And we use, in some cases where appropriate, deep compost mulch. And then where it's not appropriate, we'll thin that mulch out and use a very thin layer of mulch. But the whole point of what we're trying to do in here is change the biology. One of the things that we've noticed with this, in our first year, we had a lot of weed pressure. We still do in some spots, particularly not so much on the beds, but particularly off to the sides of the beds. We still get a fair amount of weeds that we have to come through and maybe hoe out. But within our growing beds themselves, we're tending to see less and less weed pressure. This is an example of our ranunculus. And some of this ranunculus, these corms that you're seeing right here in the front, these were from saved corms. This is Amidine Pastel Mix, and it was saved from last year. And these guys were just planted 4 days ago, so they're not, super big and robust. But, and they were pre-sprouted right around, I think we started the process right around the 15th of October. And today again is November 5th. And so this is kind of where these guys are at. We previously had in here, the previous crop was dried beans. And when we cropped that out, what we did is we came in and we clipped the plants off and left the roots in the ground. Began to really build up the moisture level in the soil, but irrigated the beds really well. And then we applied what is called JADAM microorganism solution, which is it's basically a microorganism extract, kind of a non-aerated tea of microorganisms that we found growing in our compost piles, and used that 4 times on the row to help build up the biology. One of the things it does almost immediately for us is it helps in moisture retention. Sometimes if you've come in to irrigate something that you haven't done irrigated for a while, because we had dried beans in here, the soil is maybe a little reluctant to take up moisture. But once we applied the JMS, what we notice is the soil gets looser and it absorbs moisture really good. That is just a way to inoculate the soil with some good microorganisms from our compost pile to get things started. Okay, the pre-sprout system we use on the ranunculus is the same one. There's videos. We'll give you a link to it. It's the same one we've been doing for years. And the whole idea is we soak these corms for a very brief period of time just to get them hydrated up. And then we'll put them into trays and pre-sprout them so that we can plant them almost as like plugs.
The one we're using is the most recent pre-sprout. It's in trays, not the one we used to do in bags.
Right. They no longer do that at all. So these are actually, we want them to grow like little plants. So they do have leaves on, and then again, these are 4 days old. So this is about what they look like in the plug tray. We did miss one spot. That was operator error. I forgot to put a plant there. I don't know. I spaced it out. So we didn't lose anything. It just never came up because it was never there. So anyway, this is we'll before we plant, after we put the JMS down, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I missed a step. We put a thin compost layer on. Now, when I say thin, it's about a 1/4 inch. It's pretty thin. This bed is 75 feet long, and it ultimately ended up, we put about probably 5 to 7 cubic feet on this entire bed. That's it. And then again, watered it in really well, came back 24 hours later, and then we planted.
Dibbled it in.
Right. Now, one of the things that is different that we're doing in these guys is we're trying to give the roots of these transplants an inoculation of good microbiology. And I think if you go back and you look at our video on planting winter dianthus, we showed how we did that. Why? By making a slurry mix in a mixing tub of compost soil, or the soil right beneath the compost pile, that has huge amounts of microorganisms in it, funguses and things of that nature, good things in it. And we make a slurry of it, and then we'd set these trays in it for about 3 to 5 minutes before we actually plant. So the roots of the ranunculus were well inoculated, and the plug itself had a lot of moisture in it. So the key to the success, why these guys made the transplant really well, 4 days, and there was barely any wilting or anything of that nature, was good hydration, the microbiology in the soil itself, and applying a little extra microbiology to the transplant itself.
Why are you doing microbiology and not like applying fertilizers and all that? Why is this your choice?
Well, I've learned over time, and this gets into a philosophical thing, that it's the biology in the soil and the relationship between that biology and the plant that drives the growth of the plant. If you're putting in a fertilizer, biology is going to act on that fertilizer and then make it available to the plant. But if you really think about it, specifically why I'm not really fertilizing ranunculus again, is it gets back to that same thing, that these ancestors of these plants were designed to grow in low nitrogen, low mineral availability, because they grew at a time of the year when the biology itself is not as vigorous and active as, say, in the springtime or summer, like when you're growing sweet corn or something of that nature. So you can put the feather meal and all that other kind of stuff down, and you're gonna get a lot of growth, no doubt about it. If it's warm enough, the biology will act on it and the plant will uptake it. And what you can end up with, though, particularly if you're too much nitrogen, is you can end up with a beautifully looking tall green plant that you just say, this is fantastic, it's beautiful, but it's a bug magnet, because in the plant itself, it's going to be saying, nitrogen to plants, I've heard this said before, and maybe I'm misphrasing it, but it's like crack cocaine. If you give it to them, they're going to take it. But if you take too much, it doesn't do them any good. It can actually put them into an imbalanced situation, particularly between stuff like the calcium and the phosphate in it. And the proteins that the plant will make they'll have excess nitrogen in their sap, and things will happen that will make it attractive to insects. Particularly these type of plants will be very attractive to aphids. So one of the things we do to keep the aphid pressure at bay is to keep the nitrogen levels and the fertilization levels to a natural state almost. So we're using the JMS, the microorganisms from the compost pile and the pre-treat, and that is our starting point for fertility.
It's not a guarantee, though, right?
Nothing's a guarantee.
One year we had really lush green ranunculus. It got almost hip high, but they attracted.
When it was blooming.
Right, but when the aphids attacked it like crazy, and the stems split.
Well, they went after the blooms and they went after the stems, and we had a lot of problems.
But then when we used the KNF last year, everything seemed to be more in balance.
Right. So the next thing we'll do on this, probably in about a week or so, after these guys have really got acclimated and they're looking like they're pretty good, they're moving along really well, is we'll hit them twice over the next 2 months in November, in late November and into December with what's called fermented seawater. Okay, what is that? It is taking a gallon of good water, meaning you don't want something that's chlorinated out of your tap. You want something that's non-chlorinated. Rainwater would work, or softened water that maybe, or something that was run through a filter. But all that chlorine, amine stuff is gone from it. And you will add approximately 3/4 of a teaspoon of it'd be about 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt, and about 4 milliliters of LAB. And we have videos on how to make LAB. We'll do a video on how to make fermented seawater too. Maybe that'll help out. But the whole point then is that is also added some FPJ in it, about 4 milliliters of that. That's a biostimulant. And some of the sugar in the FPJ is also useful, the LAB, to begin to propagate. And so that LAB will propagate in that mixture with the minerals from the seawater and will make a really absorbent biostimulant for the plant itself, and will give it an extra boost of minerals. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is give it an extra boost of minerals. And then in January, the last step of what we're going to be doing is we'll be applying with our KNF solutions, we'll be applying water-soluble calcium phosphate. And the whole point on that is to balance out. Once they begin to get to the bud stage, that's when we start applying that, because that's the reproductive stage. And that typically is going to be late January, February, when they're starting to make that transition for us.
So no matter how early we plant these, when do they bloom?
They always seem to bloom right around the 15th of March. It doesn't matter.
We cannot seem to make that count.
Light. It's got to be a light thing, you know. I've heard that said too, that they respond to blooming right around 12 hours. And when they start getting into that 10, they start bud formation when they start getting into that 10 hours or 10 to 11 hours a day length type frame.
Quickly, what is your spacing?
Spacing between the plants, look, I'm not religious about this, but my attempt is to get about 9 inches between the plants, and then somewhere 10 to 12 inches between the rows. And that's kind of, you know, sometimes I fail on that and some things get a little closer, but in general, that's kind of the objective. And the whole idea is, as you may notice, if you look down here, you see, oh, well, look, there's a side shield on his tunnel, and he's got the side pushed up, and this is the 5th of November. It's got both the ends of this thing up. We've got good airflow in here. That is important with these guys. You want to avoid fungal diseases and things of that nature. You want to have good airflow around your plants. You may also notice that we don't use any black plastic with burned holes in it. And do we get weeds? Yeah. But, you know, it's not that big of a deal. We'll come through the collinear hoe. You can see the plants are spaced apart pretty fast. You can zip through these beds pretty fast. And as the years are going by, we're getting less and less weeds anyway.
Because
so
we don't till.
We don't till. So, I mean, that's just kind of what we've been noticing. In the beds themselves, the weed levels are going down pretty good.
So this row right here is typically what it looks like pre-planting. This is where our snapdragons are going to go.
Yeah, snapdragons will be planted later this month. Okay, what was here before was in our summertime, we had tomatoes in here. So we had tomatoes up on trellis string, and we had them down the length of this. And in order to keep moisture levels constant for the tomato plants, what we did is we used our scythe, and we, in the spring before grass seed actually got to the pollination stage, but it was good enough to make some grass straw, we went out and scythed out and put a layer down of about, at that time it was about 4-inch layer around the base of the tomato plants. It kept the moisture constant, and the tomato plants did really well. We actually didn't even have to irrigate them that much, and the plants just grew really well and put out a fair amount of tomatoes. So then when the freeze came and we were done, we chopped the tomato plants down and left them in place on top of the mulch. And then what we've done is we've now put on, in this case, it's a little heavier mulch. This is a little bit more of maybe a deep mulch type look. It's probably about 2 inch, maybe a little less than 2 inch, 1.5 inch on top. And this is urban waste compost. And we're keeping this very well wetted down. We've also put on the JADAM microorganism solution on this. We've given it 1 application so far, and we'll give it at least 3 more before planting time. The next step I'm going to do, and I'll be doing this today, is since there's a lot of biomass underneath this compost, I'm going to be adding in from our worm bins red wigglers in various places on this to let it go after what's underneath the compost itself. So when we get another 3 weeks out, which is going to be planting these guys probably right around Thanksgiving time, the majority of this stuff is probably, what you're going to see is mostly just urban compost on top. And the worms will just keep working on it until they get what they want done, and then they'll either move on to someplace else or they will just go away because there's nothing to eat. But the whole idea is we're using the worms, and they're going to deposit some vermicast while they're working on it. So this will be a low fertility area that maybe is boosted a little bit by that type of activity. And we'll also, like I said, keep applying microorganism solution extract into here during that period of time too. Then we'll plant the snapdragons. So the whole point was just to show what you could do no-till in a tunnel situation without having to resort to really any kind of mechanical means to get things done. And things respond, they grow well. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching today. Be sure to check out our other playlists on no-till stuff, and because we have, I think, quite a few videos on no-till practices. So be sure to check that out. And thanks again for everything and watching, and we hope you stay safe and have a good day, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.